average 2.9% per year. Since we joined, it's been growing at 1.7% per year. There's no evidence that we actually need to be part of this bloc in order to do well economically. That's what they're really scared of. But the deal that Boris Johnson has put together is really just fake Tory Brexit too. It has been cobbled together out of Theresa May's terrible surrender instrument. It keeps us under the European Courts of Justice. It does not give us proper control of our fishing waters. It will not allow us to regrow our fishing industry, which used to be so prosperous and successful in this country, because we have great access to the seas and the oceans. They've also signed us up to a European Union military union, EDU, the European Defence Union, where our children are going to be sent to fight probably on the outskirts of the EU in order to clobber any rebellion against the EU. We've signed up to it since the Brexit vote. We've signed 7 agreements to participate in a unified European military. Just recently we've seen in this last week the EU put together a border force with EU flags and badges on people's shoulders. And that is the beginning of a single EU-controlled security and military arrangement. In Florence, when Theresa May spoke about the deal she was trying to make, she mentioned security 18 times, and that was a message to the EU: we are going to participate fully in European Union military and defence. The argument is often put that the nations, the member states, the nations of the EU are really a family of nations, and that they retain their sovereignty. But they don't retain sovereignty. And we know this because there was a court case a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2014, where the European Union fought to retain its sovereignty. What happened was the court dealt with the question of whether the EU was subject to the European Court of Human Rights. When nations join the EU, they are required to be in the European Council. They're required to submit to the European Court of Human Rights, to give up their own sovereignty and make themselves subordinate and subject to those European courts. But the EU argued in this case, what's called Opinion 2/13, that the EU itself was not bound by the ECHR because it needed to retain its own sovereignty. And that tells you what the real relationship is between EU member states and the EU. It is one of submission. We voted against that. How are we going to leave? How are we going to get out? How are we going to get our freedom back? Because freedom is what this argument is really about. It's about us, free individuals in a free nation, with us governing ourselves with our own parliament and our own government, and those people in that parliament answering to us, the voters. The only way we can do it is through unity, solidarity, and determination. We must never give up. We must keep listening to what our hearts tell us. We must never be frightened by the state, by the increasing control of our state as a puppet of the European Union. And we must keep fighting and keep fighting. On the 23rd of June 2016, many of you will remember having campaigned very hard for it. We won the referendum. I was at the count in Kensington and Chelsea, and we knew that if Sunderland was over 60% Leave, then there was a very strong chance that Leave would win. I didn't think we could win because we were up against an enormous array of institutions and spending that was determined to stop us. And it was quite an unfair fight. But the Sunderland result came in, and all of my team, I had 90 volunteers on the last day, on polling day, and all of my team were there starting to grin and smile as we knew that we'd won it. The most exciting, apart from my wedding night, obviously, the most exciting night of my life. And we carried on partying. They kicked us out of the town hall at 4 a.m. All of the Stronger In campaigners had left, scowling. And we went and watched Mr. Dimbleby announce the result on television, and we drank champagne to celebrate this fantastic occasion. And then at about 6:30, we thought, well, we're not going to bed. This is too exciting. What are we going to do? So we got in my van and we drove to Westminster, and we drove round and round the cenotaph past the gates of Downing Street, which is now a fortress, huge gates, 15, 20 foot high, to protect our government and our Prime Minister from the people that they're supposed to represent and whom they do not represent. And as we drove round and round singing and beeping the horn, and I had huge Leave banners on my van, and we were waving leaflets and everything out of the window and singing I Vow to Thee My Country and the national anthem and all of the patriotic songs that we were inspired to sing. There was a camera crew outside Downing Street, and they wouldn't point the camera at us. It was the BBC, and they didn't want to show anybody actually celebrating this fantastic victory. They almost certainly would be pleased to see a country on the far side of the world win its independence, but they were very unhappy to see Britain winning its independence. But on about the 5th circuit around the cenotaph, finally the camera turned towards us and filmed us. And I thought that will have to be on the news, because this is people celebrating a fantastic victory for British independence in the middle of London. But it didn't appear on the news for a week, and they put a little 5-second clip of it on the end of Andrew Neil's show, and they didn't wish to show anybody celebrating. It's as if you good people who fought so hard for this independence don't exist. It's not that they hate you, they simply don't care about you, and they do not want to acknowledge your existence. They don't want to acknowledge your votes, they don't want to acknowledge you at all.
All on the gravy train.
But we won that vote, and at that time I used to say, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. But I knew, and a few days after that my campaign group had a party, and there were over 100 people there, and I spoke at that party, and I said to them, it is not the end or the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning, because I knew that it was just the first skirmish. That's why we've got to keep fighting. I reckon back then it would take 10 years actually to get us out, because we've seen what happened in Ireland, we've seen what happened in the Netherlands and in France. In France they voted 55% against the constitution for the EU, and the Parliament ignored it, and in 2007 they actually passed and ratified the Treaty of Lisbon, which was a 99% identical text to the constitution for the EU. They simply renamed it, put it back to the Parliament, and they pushed it through without asking the people who had already voted against it. We need to be very proud of what we've achieved. We need to remember that feeling of winning, and we need to have that feeling again. And to achieve that, we're going to have to keep campaigning. Do not give up. Keep going. It's fantastic to see so many people here today campaigning hard for this fantastic, wonderful cause that we all believe in so strongly. Be proud of it. Talk to people in the pub. Talk to people at work. Talk to everyone you know. Get on social media and keep campaigning for our independence as a nation, because we have so much to be proud of. We will be free at last if all of you good people persuade everyone that we have to do this. In the last few days there's been a poll by, I think it was Survation, 26,000 people polled, and the Leave vote in that poll was 54%. Well, in 2 years of a barrage of media, negative media about Brexit, we're still making progress. So keep going, keep doing what you're doing today, keep persuading people, keep persuading good Tories who may even have the opportunity at some point. They may be the party of Edward Heath, but hopefully they are convalescing, and hopefully at some point in the near future they're going to work it out that the people of this country really do want to leave, and they're going to actually deliver it for us. Keep fighting. Thank you for listening to me.
Hey! Hey! Richard is our leader, Richard is our leader, da 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 da, da 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 da. Richard is our leader, Richard is our leader. Da.
Thank you, Richard. And I think we agree with everything he had to say there. come to, over the months, this last year, why the leavers haven't been out on the streets is because we all believed in democracy. And it's become apparent that democracy is just not what we thought it was. When you've got a prime minister who go off signing autocratically up to this EU reunification. And by the way, I agree with Richard. I've asked the question of 3 Conservative MPs, and they never gave me a real answer. They either don't know or they're sworn to secrecy. But it is concerning. And the second thing is John Bercow. I mean, the power that guy had. Anyway, fortunately he's going, isn't he? And finally, the civil servant who control Ollie Robbins springs to mind. So what we need to do is carry on, and we need to reinforce peacefully on the rallies to say, look, we're not having it. You know, we're fighting for democracy now. And we have got a fellow Conservative here, Stephen Wood, who was on the Vote Leave trails, weren't you? As I was 3.5 years ago. Do you want to speak to that?
Right, thank you everyone. Just over 4 years ago, I embarked on a long journey and I joined the Vote Leave team. And there I met many good people from all parties, and even a couple from the Labour Party. And it's nice to see some of them faces here today. But here we are, 4.5 years after I started, and 3.5 years after we voted to leave the EU, we're still here. Maybe, and maybe not, we'll be leaving in 5 days' time. I hope we do. And I'm like the rest of you, really. I want to leave with a no deal. When I voted many years ago, and I went round on the trail talking about leaving the EU, it was quite clear then we were in or we're out. Leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, not putting a foot in a little bit or an arm in. It was about leaving fully. And that's what David Cameron was saying. And he did the right thing, I believe, the day after the referendum. He resigned. But unfortunately, we ended up with Theresa May, who made 116 promises that we're going to leave on the 31st of March. And I feel your anxiety that we're still here today after them promises from the Conservative Party. So we had a problem, is we needed a new leader, we recognised we needed a new leader, but there was many that still backed Theresa May at that time. And putting all things aside, all the other things besides Brexit, Theresa did a fairly good job. But she wasn't a true leader of the party, and we were in search for a leader. And that's how we ended up with Boris. Now, some of you might not like Boris. I've heard you say you disagree with what he's doing. I believe that Boris is our only hope at this moment in time. And he's worked miracles, really, because we were told we wouldn't get another deal out of Europe. That was it. We were getting the rhetoric off the BBC that the EU were not going to talk to us again. We weren't going to reopen negotiations. And here we are. We've got another deal on the table. And as I said before, I didn't want a deal. We have got a deal. And it is significantly different to Theresa May's deal, in my opinion. And if we go with Boris, I am backing Boris's deal at this stage because I think it's the only way we can actually get out. I think after a general election we could move the goalposts slightly. I've been in business many years, and my business deals do change halfway through. I move the goalposts in my favour now and again. I'm sure we could do that with Europe, but we need to get out. And the longer we leave this and we let the European elites let us have our democracy, we have a problem. Because this is what it's about at the end of the day. It's about democracy. We're being denied democracy, and we all have to work together. There's no point in arguing against one party to another, saying that I'm going to vote the Brexit party or I'm going to vote the UKIP. We need to stick together and make sure we back the strongest person to do what we all want. We all want to leave Europe. But unfortunately, we keep going on about this deal. It's not a deal, it's a withdrawal agreement. The deal is going to linger on for years afterwards. And who would you want to do the deal with getting the best trade out of Europe? Well, I'd rather Boris be doing the deal than anyone else. And we've got the rest of the world to trade with. We've got our Commonwealth that we're stifled with at the moment. We're not allowed to trade. The Labour Party talk about workers' rights and workers' jobs. Well, we've seen our industry crumble. Our manufacturing go down to next to nothing because it's all moved into Europe. So this great nation that we all have trust in has reinvented itself. So we now lead the world's service industry. So all the service industries are looked after in the UK. But I'll tell you something, when we leave Europe, we'll rebuild our industries. And we will have industries back here in the UK. And we will be Great Britain, truly once and for all, again.